Hey, what's up guys? Jerome here from the Bonsai Supply, and today we are going to be approach grafting this super old Yamadori California Juniper. So this tree, I just acquired it. It is around 300 to 350 years old plus probably, so it's even a little older than that. And the way that I can guesstimate the age of a juniper that was grown in the wild, and this only applies to junipers that were grown in the wild, is that they thicken 1 inch per every 75 to 100 years. Now at the widest point here at the bottom, this section here is right at 4 inches. So I could comfortably say that this tree is 250 to about 400 years old. And that really depends on a wide variety, right? Because we have the 75 to 100 year range. So I want to comfortably, put it between 250 and about 350 to 400 years old. But then at the end of the day, age is just a number and doesn't really matter. The thing that really matters is that we have a cool piece of material here that we can turn hopefully into a really nice specimen down the line. First of all, take a look at this deadwood. I mean, isn't that just super cool? That spiraling deadwood that you see up there and that fine grain. This was created over the past, 100, 200 years by just continuously being beat up by Mother Nature. This is being created by sandstorms. Now also fun fact is that this tree, California junipers, come mostly from the Mojave Desert, or at least mostly the ones that we collect or that we use a lot in bonsai come from the Mojave area, more specifically like the Jawbone Canyon. And there the trees are being beat up by the weather, by sandstorms, but also by drought. Because during the, not just drought, but also extreme heat and extreme cold. So they have huge temperature fluctuations. Like in the summer, it can get 110 plus degrees, and they are outdoors in the beating sun, and they haven't seen water for months, so they're very drought tolerant. Or then on the flip side, in the wintertime, it can go below freezing. So they can live in a very wide range of climate and temperature, which makes them, well, number one, the deadwood looks spectacular, but also for us as bonsai artists, it's great because you can have them pretty much anywhere. So now, let me tell you why I am grafting on this tree. So as you can see here the foliage up here. Let's take a closer look. This is the native California juniper. Foliage is definitely not the worst that I have seen, but it's definitely also not the best that I have seen. Look at it. The color is not very appealing. It is also very coarse, and for a tree this size, I think this foliage is way too big and way too coarse and way too rugged. I want something that's a little more compact, a little smaller, and a little finer at the same time as well. And so that's why I chose Shimpaku foliage to be grafted onto this tree, and I have two to choose from. I have the Kishu, or I have the Itoigawa. I haven't quite decided yet which one I'm going to choose, because I also haven't quite decided on how am I going to do the graft and where am I going to do the graft. So in bonsai, we use mainly 3 grafts. We use the thread graft, which is mostly used for deciduous trees, which we do in the spring, where we thread a branch through the trunk, and once that thread takes, we have the branch at our side location. Then the graft that I'm doing here today is called an approach graft, which you can either do in mid to late spring, all the way until the summertime. So right now it's a good time. Obviously, the later you do it in the season, the more you have to protect the graft over the winter time. Then there's also a scion graft, which is also mainly used for conifers, the same as the approach graft. That's something that we mostly use on conifers, and the scion graft are done in the late winter time. Now the scion grafts take probably the longest out of all of the grafts to actually take, but they also look probably the most natural one. You don't have big scars or anything like that, but the scion grafts, it takes a lot of skill to do it right and to make it look right, and then for them to take, it takes a very long time. The thread graft is a very quick solution, but it's not something that we can use on a juniper because we have to leave the foliage on here, which leaves us with the approach graft, which is what we're going to do here today. So rule number one is that we have to attach the approach graft from the back, because once the approach graft actually starts to take, you can usually see it. So that's why we want to make sure we attach it to the back of the main branches or to the back of the trunk, so it is not that visible. But before we even decide on the foliage, and before we even like start to look at where we want to apply the approach graft, we have to first decide on what the front is of the tree and the angle, and that will help us determine on where we will do the approach graft. Now, before I go ahead and discuss the front with you, let's take a quick look at the foliage comparison here. So in the center, we have the acacia, and then we have the California juniper to the right, and then the Togawa to the left. And that's just a little foliage comparison for you to see up close why I'm doing it and which one out of the other two Shimpaku foliage I will choose. All right, so now let me spin this tree around for you, and let's take a closer look at this tree in terms of what an appealing front could be. So something that we have to keep in mind when we design or decide on what front we want to use as the juniper, we have to keep the lifeline in mind when we design the front of the tree. Because when you have a juniper like this, that's a Yamadori that was collected. Well, Yamadori is a Japanese term which means collected from the wild, but more specifically collected in the mountains. Now, since this tree was collected in the desert, I'm still going to call it a Yamadori, even though it might be technically incorrect. But it doesn't really matter. It's a cool tree, it's a Yamadori. So we have to keep the lifeline in mind, because we want to have that dance, right? That yin and yang, that life vein and the dead wood. We want to have a nice dance in between, because otherwise it might look like a tanuki, or we just want to highlight that dance, right? And so when I first got this tree, I was thinking of having it something like this as the front. However, when you look at the tree from this front, yeah, you have some incredible deadwood, and if you were to tilt it more to this side, you would be able to appreciate more of this deadwood section in here. However, this section here becomes too straight. Take a look at this, how straight it is from this angle. But when I rotate it, and I'm thinking probably something more along the lines of this, where you can see more of this bend at the bottom here, and then you can see how the deadwood kind of twists and it leans forward, and we can also see the life vein much better. So let's take a look at the life vein, right? The life vein, this tree has two life veins at the bottom here, which are these two right here that then merge together here, and then they go all the way up to the top. And the life vein just continues all the way up to this part of the foliage. And so we have to keep that in mind, because when I look at the tree from this angle that you guys are looking at it right now, I have that really nice life vein that is really highlighted. I have that crazy deadwood, but I think we need to change the angle a little bit more. Now, also something that you might not be able to see, take a look at the deadwood here. You can see this deadwood section on top here. That's really beautiful. That's kind of pointing out. Here you can see this deadwood section is here. I want this section to peek out from the canopy, right? And so from the apex, I want it to poke out of the top. And so I want to graft somewhere in here and bring the foliage down so that this deadwood section here looks like it pierces through the apex and make the whole design look so much more dramatic. Now, I think in terms of angle, we're almost right there, but something is a little missing. I think it's a little too boring. Well, not really boring, because it is a cool piece of material, but it's a little, I think we can improve it a little bit more. And when I look at how am I going to change the angle, there's this deadwood section up here that just goes straight into that section. So I think if we tilt this back a little bit, like this. Oh yeah. Yeah, if we tilt it back like that, let's see here if you guys can see that. I'm thinking something like this. Lean the tree back, approach graft from here. I'm going to show you how that works. And then you have that really cool base coming out like that. And the deadwood now leans more towards you, and I think we can build a beautiful canopy in here with a couple, with a couple pads coming down like that, and make it look like a very, very beautiful design. So I think I'm going to keep this in mind as my front. So now I think the next step that we want to do is we want to clear out a little bit of foliage up here, and we also want to go ahead and clean up the life and dead vein a little bit more, because we want to start to chase the life vein and see how it acts and see how much space we actually have to do that approach graft. And so let's discuss the tools that we are going to be needing to make this approach graft. I'm not going to use all of these tools, but I prepared myself. I set myself up for success. All right, so first off here, we have some sandpaper, which we are going to use to remove a little bit of the new plant, of the bark, so that we can then attach it to the approach graft, and it will take much better. So this is a sandpaper, which is, I use a 120, but you can also use something that's a little softer, a little stronger. I brought some zip ties so that we can attach the approach graft better, depending on what we choose. Some grafting tape. I have some wood scrapers here, which we are actually going to use first to highlight that life vein a little better. Then I have a piece of chalk so that I can mark where I'm going to do the approach graft, which will help me along a little bit, because when I work down here on the new plant and I go back up there to the mother plant and I try to marry them together, I might forget where exactly I wanted it to be. And so that's why I have a piece of chalk so I can mark that section. Next off, we need to have some cut paste, and this is this gray putty that I like to use for grafts. And then last but not least, we have two different small types of nails. We have a thumbtack and the little small nail. So the thumbtacks I use that once I put the approach graft in the channel here, I can use this thumbtacks to secure it, and then I can use this little nail to just hammer it in a little bit more. And then actually I almost forgot the most important tool, which is the Dremel here. We use the Dremel here with this wood saw in the front to make the channel. Okay, so now let's go ahead and start to work on the life vein. So it is important to make sure that we have a beautiful transition here in between the life vein and then the deadwood. And you can see here the life vein is red, and I used my sanding paper that I'm going to use for the graft after, just to kind of go up and down a little bit and just to help clean this section up. Now, if I wouldn't have done that, I would have thought, or previously, before doing this, I thought that my lifeline on top here was a lot thinner than it actually is. And now it widened out about another ½ an inch. And so that gives me a good section here to then actually do the approach graft. So now I just have to go ahead now and find the perfect section of the approach graft. So as I was cleaning up the life vein, I kept looking at the two whips that I have, the Itoigava and the Kishu. And I thought for this sized tree, I think the Kishu would be perfect. So I think I'm going to use this center whip here, and here's how the grafting is going to work. So I need a section up here, and with junipers you can either graft upwards or downwards or sideways. So with pines, you mostly have to do the grafting into the same direction on the live vein as the foliage is flowing. But on the junipers, you can go against it if you want to, or sideways, like I said. So I'm going to make a channel with my drill in the live vein, and I'm going to make it about 2 inches at least long, and I want to make it as deep as the whip that I'm going to use. So if I'm going to use this whip, take a look at this. This whip is probably a little smaller than 1/4 inch. So I want to make sure that the channel that I'm carving in here is the same depth as this. So let me go ahead now and prepare this whip a little bit, because I have to clean up the foliage down here so that it can then beautifully be placed in here. And I'm going to take you through this step by step. Alright, so as you saw, I used the chalk to mark exactly the section, and as you can see, I'm going to do it right behind it, so that once the new foliage starts to take, you're not going to be able to see the graft in the back, and that was done on purpose. So once I have made my section here, I also removed the foliage down here, and I also marked this section here that we are going to insert into the channel once the channel is made. And so now that I have everything marked, I'm going to use my Dremel here with the wood carving tool, and I'm just going to set it up from the back, and I'm just carefully going to insert it on the top here and then just pull it down towards me, and then hopefully with one swift go it will be deep enough for the new whip to fit exactly into this section. Can you see how this, how the graft here is sitting slightly elevated from the channel? We want to make sure that the graft is exactly sitting inside of the channel, so I have to go a little deeper. And when I use this tool, I want to go about this very soft and then clean off the edges with my grafting knife. Okay, so I used 2 thumbtacks as I was attaching the whip here into the groove, and then I used a smaller nail to hammer it through the center. And now when you look at it from this side here, up here, you can barely see it, right? It's really in there in this groove, and that's what's going to give us that graft. And so what I'm going to do next here is actually I'm going to use this grafting tape. Here we go, and what I'm going to do here is I want to just wrap it around it, and the good thing is that there's not a lot of dead wood up here, so I can just wrap it around it. So the reason why I use this clear wrap thing here is because I want to keep the rainwater out of this section here. However, I want to make sure that I still have moisture in here, so it shouldn't dry out completely. I should have a little bit of moisture in here, but not like excess rainwater coming through here, and that's so that we have more success getting this here to take. Alright, so I'm not gonna lie, but this was probably one of the most difficult grafts that I've ever had to do. whenever you have to graft on the trunk, it is always very, very difficult. Versus grafting up top on branches, it's a lot easier because you have a lot more areas where you can attach this little bucket to. But moving forward, I'm just going to keep this in the greenhouse for the next couple of days because it is storming outside like crazy. It has been for a whole week, and I don't want this to get drenched. So I'm just going to mist it for the next couple of days, keep the bottom here, prevent it from drying out. But then after the rain is over, the storm, I'm going to move this back outside, and I'm going to treat the bottom the same as the top, fertilize it, water it, keep it the same. Probably mid to late fall, I'm going to remove this plastic wrap here, and once the my new plant here has thickened up and has filled in the groove, and you can see that the old the California juniper has kind of calloused over this one and starting to close. That's when I know it took. And at that point, I'm going to cover this back up, but then I'm going to use the potty cut paste. And I'm probably going to leave this on here for a whole other growing season. So I'm going to leave it on there throughout the rest of this year, and probably middle, maybe even throughout the next year, depending on how well it does. I'm going to be able to tell by the front piece that's wrapped in here. I'm going to be able to tell when that starts to thicken up and starts to grow on its own, and it's thicker than the section that I inserted. That's when I know that it took, and I can cut the back section off. But I have to be very careful because as soon as the front section here starts to thicken up more than the back, I have to apply a tourniquet, which is a fancy way of saying taking a wire around the host plant and choking off the energy flow, the sap flow, because if I wouldn't do that, this section here would bulge up like crazy. So I have to keep a close eye on this once I remove it, especially next year in the spring. And then I can remove the back here, and then the new foliage, if it is still green after about 60 days, that's when I know it has securely taken. And then in about 2 years from now, so we are talking spring 2024, I can then probably remove the entire old growth and then style the new whip, and that would be super, super cool. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any more questions, please let me know. I know this was more of an advanced video, but I think you guys are ready because we've prepared you for this moment all of these years. So please let me know if you have any comments or any questions. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I will catch you guys next time. Thank you guys.